This is the best of the week on Relevant Radio.
The issues that matter most, right here. The Drew Mariani Show
on Relevant Radio.
In an American first, young men are now more religious than young women. A quote from the New York Times says, for the first time in modern American history, young men are now more religious than their female peers. They attend services more often and are more likely to identify as religious. Another article puts it thus: Gen Z men pour into church pews more often than women, flipping the trend on faith.
It's the Drew Mariani Show on Relevant Radio.
Yeah, that was Sky News reporting on the phenomena of young men becoming more religious than women. What is up with that? I'd love to hear your story. Honestly, I think it's great. I really do. There's something incredible happening across the country. And I want to explore it. Father Dwight Longenecker had written about this, and I want to bring him on in a second here. I sit back here, and I was reading through his article. I realized that for decades now, we've been told that women are naturally more religious than men. And statistically, I think it's true, especially among the older generations. I don't know. I fell in love with my faith early. And I know a lot of other guys have too. I mean, this is with younger generations like Millennials or Gen Zs, it's no longer the case. In fact, you should check out Father Longenecker's, he writes these commentaries, Father Dwight Longenecker commentaries, and he was sharing that more young men than women right now. Just, try to get your head around that. More men than women now in America identify as religious. I think that's fantastic. With the competition of pornography and so many other things, all this toxic language that has been thrown around in the past, we hear words like toxic masculinity and, men are mocked all the time on television. Fathers are mocked. I mean, there's a whole litany of things that guys come under attack for. He says that men are becoming more religious than women, and that's a shift that should make you sit up and take notice. He talked about what he saw firsthand. Father comes from I believe it's South Carolina is where he's located. He's a parish there. In fact, he is at Our Lady of the Rosary in Greenville, South Carolina. He's seen this trend in his own parish. He sees young men and older teens, men in their 20s and 30s, as we're talking about here, early 30s, both single and married. They're coming to him. They're asking to learn about the Catholic faith. In fact, so many of them are doing this. He had to add an extra team, I guess, for the RCIA classes to keep up. I mean, it's phenomenal. What are they doing there? I mean, maybe we can learn something. Take this to our own parishes, right? Maybe you got a son or a daughter in their 20s or 30s. These are not just casual inquiries either. These young men are biblically literate. They're theologically curious. They're deeply thoughtful. They're exploring the richness of the faith and our tradition. And he says they come from evangelical backgrounds. They seek something deeper, more historical, more grounded. So what's behind the rise of these religious young men? I guess the best person to ask is Father Dwight, who's seen it firsthand. He's a convert, by the way, to the Catholic faith. And I always love his story. If you're not familiar with it, it's well worth reading. Check him out, DwightLongenecker.com. That's his web address, DwightLongenecker.com. He's a contributor to the National Catholic Register, Catholic Herald, and a regular voice here over the years. Father, welcome back. Good to talk with you.
Good. Nice to talk to you again, Drew.
When I saw your piece, I thought, man, that's great news. What can we learn? Or maybe what are you doing? I mean, these guys are coming to you. Tell me what's happening in your parish. You seem to have an overflow of young men on fire with the faith. What are you doing?
Well, one of the things is, I think at our Greenville, the worship in the church life is not what Bishop Barron calls beige Catholicism. Okay, we have a beautiful new church built in a traditional Romanesque style. Our worship is reverent and traditional in its style, although it's a Novus Ordo in English. It's not the traditional Latin Mass. Still, the worship and the teaching and the parish life is traditional in that sense, and it's deeply rooted in the past and our deep traditions and our deep, history of the Catholic Church. And I think in this fast-paced world where society is changing ever more rapidly, young people are caught up in this kind of turbulent tornado of storm of change. People questioning what is a man, what is a woman, what is a family? Do men have a career or not? Are they actually, and they've been attacked by the twin monsters of misplaced feminism and extreme homosexualism. And so there's a kind of sexual crisis there. There's a crisis of identity. And a lot of men are saying, I need to put my roots deep. I need to find something which is more permanent, more real. Now, for instance, the Canadian psychologist Jordan Peterson has been really huge with the same Generation Z young men, and he explores some of these same themes: how to be responsible, how to be grown up, how to actually get deeply rooted in the traditions of our culture.
I find it really fascinating on a number of levels. These young men are turning to religion, a faith that is both strong and sensitive, right? Rooted in tradition and yet intellectually rigorous. We see it here in the faith. I see this with vocations too. I know there's some religious orders that have abandoned the habit, and their numbers are dwindling. They tend to go much more secular. I think people don't want stuff that's watered down. We don't want lukewarm, watered down Christianity. We want authentic Catholicism. There's something beautiful about the liturgy, the deep spirituality, the teachings that the church stands on. I think that's attractive in a time where, men are told that, masculinity is toxic. And as you point out, there's so much of this radical ideology out there. But we also saw it in the recent elections too. And I'll let you comment on those thoughts. I mean, we saw that, who was it? Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, right? Doug Emhoff and others were touted as the new form of what it means to be a man. Tim Walz as well. And you saw how America responded to that, right? I mean, we can see what a real man is. Your thoughts on this? Is there a change happening culturally? What is it that's drawing men, both politically, but especially spiritually here, to I don't know, something that is traditional and authentic and masculine?
Well, other people have written, as well as I have, about liturgy being intrinsically, when it's celebrated in a traditional way, as being intrinsically more masculine. Yeah. Because, a lot of Protestant modern services and a lot of Catholic, I'll call it suburban Catholicism, it tends to be pretty touchy-feely. There's lots of sort of talk about emotions and talk about how you feel, and the music is kind of gushy and sentimental. Yeah. And that turns guys off, Whereas you come to a more traditional liturgy, it's solemn, it's formal. The altar boys come marching in procession with a certain solemnity, and there is a kind of formality to it, which actually appeals to men in a more objective way.
Yeah. Let's talk about male role models too, if we could, Father. How does the presence of maybe a strong, male role model in the church, like the priest or a lay leader, does that have an influence? Because there has been a certain, I don't mean this in a disparaging way, I don't get the vibe from you, but there's been a certain femininity in the church.
It's important that the priests and the deacons and the other male leadership in the church exercise a strong, but at the same time, understanding and sensitive leadership. Because a lot of these young guys are coming from broken homes. They've experienced being abandoned by their fathers, or they have deadbeat or absent fathers. Right. And so very often they're looking for a way and a place where their masculinity can be affirmed in a positive, good way. As you mentioned in the preface, not just with some Hollywood macho man, sure, with bulging muscles, but actually to be able to be a mature, sensitive, strong man in his life, and he needs good role models to be able to do that. And so it's important that we as priests and deacons and leaders in the church offer that to our guys.
Are there lessons that the church can learn from the appeals of guys today like Jordan Peterson, who's out there, or movements like these men's retreats or conferences? Are things changing in terms of the way they're reaching out to try to get these men back?
Yeah, one of the most bracing things that Jordan Peterson says, and I'll never forget, I'm not a big fan of his, but I've watched some of his stuff, and he says in his sort of usual trenchant way, what if we never lied? He said, what if we always decided that we're going to tell the truth, not even telling a small lie? Wow. And I think our society has been so full of different kinds of lies and fake news and public relations and public image that people, especially men, are looking for authenticity and simplicity and transparency, and people who are going to be honest and be down to earth and be full of common sense. And the Catholic Church in its fullness actually offers that.
I wonder what this rise that you're seeing in your parish and that we're seeing in other parts of the country too portends for the future. I mean, do you think that the rise of male religiosity signals maybe a broader, cultural shift back towards tradition and orthodoxy? Is the church going to look a little bit different as we get more men filling those pews?
I think many people are sensing that there's been a cultural shift going on, and that Americans, and I hope other Westerners are kind of fed up, certainly with the woke nonsense, and fed up with a lot of the silliness that's been happening over the last 10 or 20 years. One of the things that I always write about is I say the devil always overplays his hand.
Yeah.
He begins with a subtle lie, and a lie that is attractive, but then he has to push it and push it and push it until finally people wake up and say, oh, so this is what's going on.
Yeah. It's
And
fascinating.
I think we're at that wake up point just about now, where we're saying, oh, so this is so dumb, this is so stupid, and I can see the lie now. I can see what's going on, and so a good reaction is happening.
Hey, you can join me and listen on the Relevant Radio app to the Drew Mariani Show live each weekday at 2 to 5 Central. Thanks for listening.